Clobberin time.
Canelo's getting ready to fight Triple G for the third time. Finally, after all these damn years, we're going to get this third fight. But Canelo has said recently that he wants to, quote unquote, retire Gennady Golovkin. In my opinion, I think if Gennady were to lose, I think he's going to retire anyway. But there's a possibility that if Gennady wins, he retires, because I don't know what Golovkin really has left to do in boxing aside from beat Canelo. I think it's the only thing that's really keeping him going. In your opinion, when Canelo says something about, retiring Golovkin, what do you think of this? And is there a possibility that Canelo may be overlooking Triple G to some degree?
I think there's genuine bad feeling between these two. You look at the decisions in the first couple of fights. My personal opinion is that Golovkin won that first fight. It was a close fight, but you can have a close but clear enough winner, and I thought that's what that was. The second one being a Canelo win, I didn't have a massive problem with, but personally I thought probably Golovkin won the first one, and the second one, maybe that was the draw. So I think he's been hard done by Golovkin, and he cannot shake that. And he said some things about Canelo, about the drug ban and all the rest of it, which is a fact. It happened. That's in the books. We know that. Canelo's not reacted well to that. And I think for two guys who don't really do all that much trash talking, when you have that situation and then it gets a little bit unpleasant, you know that it's real. And I think there is nothing that Golovkin would like more than to win that third fight, and that's just a massive understatement as well. I think he badly needs to win that third fight. I think if he doesn't, I think he might find the rest of his life a little bit difficult. I hope I'm wrong, but I just get the sense that he'll be haunted if he doesn't manage to get a win against Canelo by frustration and perceived injustice. And I think he might find it really, really hard to shake off. And it's the only fight he's interested in. There's nothing out there for him other than that. You're absolutely right. It's that fight or nothing. It's taken too long. It's up at super middleweight, which doesn't really suit Golovkin, to be honest. I would love to see him win. In our game, you have to. You don't really nail your colours to the mast very often. But I'm confident that I won't be involved in that promotion. I won't be covering it. And I would like to see him win because, as I say, I thought he won that first fight. I think to get a draw and a defeat out of those first two, I think it's just incredibly difficult to take for him, and I can understand why.
I mean, he's waited so long for this third fight while Canelo's gone undisputed. He's won a light heavyweight title, and Triple G's kind of just milling around. Like he's won 4 fights since then. And a lot of people have gone into this fight saying that, well, Canelo's just a much better fighter, and some people think he's going to stop Golovkin. I'm of the mindset that these two are just made for each other like Marquez and Pacquiao were. I'm of the mindset that no matter what you think about Canelo's performances and what Gennady has done since against Derevchenko, he didn't look too great at some spots, but I think some guys just get up for each other. And I think this fight should be considered. First of all, I want to be clear. I thought Gennady won both fights. I was ringside for both. I had Gennady winning the first fight, and I had him winning 115, 113 in the second fight. I didn't argue too much with the second fight because I thought the way Canelo was aggressive could have swayed some judges, so I didn't have a problem with the second fight. But the first fight, I thought it was clearly Gennady. But I think he's just got Canelo's number. 168 is going to be tough. I think, Gennady's not a big 60-pounder as is. Canelo's, he's a little bit thicker, but I don't know if it's going to be that much of a difference. I just think these two are made for each other. I mean, maybe Canelo will prove me wrong and stop Gennady, but I just think these two are made for another all-action fight that has a possibility of being a Fight of the Year candidate. And I think nobody should overlook the possibility of Gennady pulling out the win. Now, Andy, before I ask you to give it more of your take on this fight, does anything about the Dimitri Bivol loss tell you anything about how this fight could possibly play out? And the reason I ask that is because Canelo's become so economical with his punches in his fights since the second Golovkin fight. The output hasn't been there. And is that a tell that he's got to pick up the output in order to beat somebody like Golovkin, who's a lot busier?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because he has grown used to, bit by bit, at his own pace, beating people up, hasn't he? That's what's happened in those previous fights. He left it pretty late against Kovalev, to be honest. A Kovalev who most people, did that fight would agree was past his best, but I had him up after 10 rounds, Kovalev, and I thought it was quite easy to score. And Canelo got the stoppage, but since then he's developed this habit of just piece by piece breaking people, and he managed to do it to Callum Smith even, which I think if they boxed again, that could be an interesting one to watch, because his bicep went, Callum, and there were just a few things that happened which meant that he just never really had a chance to show what he could do in that fight. And that's to Canelo's credit. I'm not saying that Canelo, wouldn't have beaten him anyway, but it's just by the by, really. But that's one that I would potentially be interested in seeing again, although he's a light heavyweight now, Callum Smith, anyway. But yeah, I agree with you. With Bivol, he was very tight, he was very compact. He couldn't just hit him on the arms and get those arms to drop and injure those arms, which is what he's done with a lot of people. He's beaten on the shell until it breaks. And then once that's happened, he's got to work, on the real target areas that you're trying to find. I just think that Golovkin can probably fight the kind of fight stylistically, or something similar to the way that Bivol went about it, because they're kind of from the same school, to be honest with you. Bivol's a Russian trained fighter. Golovkin's a Kazakh trained fighter. Their styles aren't exactly the same. I do a lot of amateur boxing, but they're not far off. And whoever you are, when you've got this method which is working brilliantly until it doesn't, that's going to give you pause for thought. It's going to put some little doubts in your head. It absolutely will. So I do think that Golovkin does still have a good solid chance in this fight, but he's past 40 now. That's one thing that I do kind of worry about a bit, because at some point, you see it with all athletes, whatever discipline they're in, all of a sudden they're just not the same as they were last time you saw them, and you can't really work out what's happened, but it's simple. They've just got older.
Who has more to lose in this fight? Canelo has been, at one moment, it was considered, he could end up with top 10 all time. The Bivol loss hurts, obviously, but a Triple G loss would be devastating. But on the other side of the coin, you just mentioned it, Triple G has invested everything into this Canelo series, and he needs this win. But, Andy, who's got more to lose?
Well, I think in his own head, Golovkin would think that he's got an awful lot to lose. And if he were to lose to Canelo again, it would be an absolute disaster. And like I said, I think he would really struggle with it and find it difficult to live with. But in the eyes of the boxing public, when you're talking about legacy and things like that, we get to decide, the observers, we get to decide what a fighter's legacy is. They can just go and do their thing and whatever happens, but they don't get to decide what their legacy is. They think they do. They talk about it endlessly, but it's not within their control. They just need to relax and just get on with their careers, is what I think about it most of the time. If Golovkin were to lose, but put up another kind of heroic effort, if you like, even if it was a defeat that everybody agreed was correct, if it went to the cards, I think people would still just look back on that first fight and say, yeah, but he won the first fight. And maybe he won the second fight as well. I don't think Canelo, even if he absolutely buries Golovkin in this third fight and puts on a masterclass, people will say, well, he was old. You made him wait so long and you dragged him up in weight. To give yourself all the advantages, because you know that in that first fight he beat you, and in the second fight it could have gone either way. It's almost a bit of a no-win for Canelo, I think, although he's got to do it. Whereas for Golovkin, I just think he's a much beloved fighter. I'm not totally sure whether Canelo is loved in the same way. You'd know better than me, because he's based over your side. What would the people think about him? Because, he has got that positive test. I know he's not the only one. Plenty of people have tested positive for things, unfortunately. But, Golovkin is certainly in the UK, people just love him because it's just everything about him, isn't he? He's got everything you would want. He's a gent. He's brilliant. He's a savage. He fights anybody. And the popularity stakes here, Triple G, I'd say is above Canelo.
Yeah, I think, Canelo's huge in the States and obviously with the Mexican crowd as well. But he does have a lot of detractors. You know, people look at after he lost to Floyd, some people say he picked at his spots. When he fought Sergey Kovalev, we knew what Sergey Kovalev was at the time. Some people will say, well, who was Caleb Plant and who was Callum Smith and who was Billy Joe Saunders? Like, who has he really beat? Which I disagree with. I think Canelo had every right to say he was the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. But I will say this. If he loses, I think he has a lot more to lose in terms of legacy. Because if you lose to a man on the judges' scorecards once, but in the public's eyes 3 times, when it comes to that legacy, that's when people start to say, maybe he wasn't really that good. How many Hall of Famers did he really beat? And I don't know where Canelo would go from there. 2 straight losses would be kind of devastating to that man's legacy, especially in a fight where you said it's kind of a no-win situation. He doesn't have a lot to gain except for money. And this is one of the few fights that Canelo takes where he's trying to shut down people rather than pick up world titles is what Canelo's usually out there to do. If you got a belt, he's coming for it. But this Golovkin thing, it's an itch that he has to scratch. And if he fails to scratch and he comes up short, I think it's devastating to his legacy. And I think a lot of people, especially here on this side of the world, will start calling him a fraud, which is terrible to say. But people will start saying it, that he was never that good to begin with. Totally unfair. But it is what it is. And that's kind of how boxing is. It's a very cruel sport.